second. Okay. Hello, everybody. I am Cindy Camp.
Great, and we're both with the York Road Partnership, which is a coalition of about 20 neighborhoods here in North Baltimore, actually just adjacent to Loyola University here. For close to 25 years, we've worked together as a coalition of neighborhoods and institutions, nonprofits, churches, to bring people together, to work together across really one of the starkest racial divides in the entire Baltimore region, which is represented by York Road. This is a picture of some of the activists working together. We learned in August of 2020 that a local funeral home located here on York Road had applied for an air pollution permit from the state. And we immediately, even though we were in the midst of COVID, mobilized to fight it. And this is the group that we've brought together, and we've met new people to be able to fight this together. If you can go to the next slide, please. So this is just a timeline of where we've been. Unfortunately, the zoning board of Baltimore City actually approved this crematorium. And we, despite all the efforts of the community with 110 letters, petition signatures, public opposition that we mobilized from our elected officials, we lost at the BMZA. We are in the midst now of appealing that decision. We appealed it first to Baltimore Circuit Court and we lost. And we are currently in the Maryland Appellate Court now appealing it. That's the next highest level to appeal and hopefully overturn the zoning board's decision granting this local funeral home, Vaughn Green, to have a human crematorium in the midst of a very, very densely packed community. So if you can go to the next slide. We had expected that the zoning board would do their job to protect public health and welfare, and they abdicated that responsibility. And they refused to really seriously look at existing poor air quality. And Cindy will go over this next, but the shocking health disparities amongst the neighborhoods. So that's where we are now. If you can go to the next slide, and I'm going to punt this over to Cindy next. And just to set this up, that red circle there is the funeral home where they want to put a human crematorium. So Cindy, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Okay. All right. Okay. So the purple indicates the residents. So this will show you exactly where they're placing it inside of our neighborhood. And when I say neighborhood, because it's mostly homes surrounding the funeral home. And my home is right across from it. And its closest neighbor is probably 10 steps away from it. So if this indication is anything, you will see exactly what our community will be dealing with and its residents right in the middle of my community and my neighborhood. And it's very alarming to me and my other neighbors that live in our community. It's very alarming. So. And if you look at this chart here, this is the indication from the darkest of the asthma rates in the community. So the darker the shade, there's an area where more residents live who have asthma. So.
And what's that little star there?
So that little star is where Vaughn Green is going to be located, right there. And so look at the asthma rate surrounding it. So that's alarming itself, right? Mm.
Mm-hmm. Then the next map, you go to the next slide. There you go.
And as well, they'll go to star as an indicator of where Vaughn Green will be. And the darker shade will indicate the levels of COPD in that area of the residence. So as you can see, that should have never been approved in a community like this, with already Black and brown people having the highest level of asthma rates. So,
Yeah. What is, been really hard for us is to see our city laying out positive things in plans. So the mayor laid out Building a Better Baltimore first term action plan and recently updated it. As you can see, they are pledging to decommission the use of waste incineration. However, they are supporting putting in a human crematorium in a neighborhood. They're pledging to do these things like increase air quality, decrease asthma rates, which, for example, childhood asthma rate in Baltimore City is twice what it is in the county. They're laying out these things that they want to do positively. None of this is showing up in our fight. So just to go to the next slide, we've worked for 25 years to bring investment, money. We advocated to build 2 brand new schools in this community. We're working hard to keep families in these communities. The neighborhoods, all those darkly colored neighborhoods on those previous maps, they've just been designated as healthy neighborhoods. So they are eligible for loans to purchase homes. We're trying to convince people that you have your family, stay here, right? Purchase a home here, invest here. We don't need this kind of investment of another air pollution source in our community. So here's how you can help. And hopefully, we're hoping that these slides will be distributed later, but follow us on Facebook. There's a link here that you can use. It'll take you to a Google form where you can let us know your contact info and we'll get back in touch with you about how you can help. Stay tuned because we have not seen hearings yet from the Maryland Department of the Environment, but there will be a formal opportunity for people to comment to the state on the air pollution permit that Vaughn Green has applied for. And the next thing, we are all getting ready to go down to Annapolis. If you go to the next slide, we have 2 bills in their emergency bills that have been introduced in Annapolis that would require a 1,000-foot setback for crematoriums from homes, daycares, and schools. This is being spearheaded by Senator Mary Washington and delegates Elizabeth Embry and Regina Boyce. So we are looking to get down to Annapolis next week and the week after that for the Senate and House hearings. So if you let us know your contact info, we can send you more info about joining us there. But thank you very much. This is, I think, a great example of where we all need to fight together and really look clearly together at, environmental justice. Is this something we are really doing, or are we just talking about it? So that's it.
Thank
Cindy,
you so much.
any last words from you?
yes, I just want to thank you because I really appreciate you bringing awareness to this, because sometimes it just feels like, we're the forgotten folk. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Cindy. And now we'll hear from Laure Drogoul, artist and educator based in Baltimore and teaching at MICA.
I think you're muted, Laura.
Oh, thank you. Well, my name's Laure Drogoul, and I am a sculptor and a performance artist. And I am very preoccupied with our relationship to the built environment and the natural world and the human body. And all that comes to play as we sort of are dealing with this incredible climate change, which seems to be getting worse and worse. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the projects that I've done with schools in different schools and in the community. So here I'm down in the dumps, and this is literally in Bar Harbor. In 2009, I was there teaching installation art and developed a project where the students just went to the dump, picked brought it into the studio and built an entire project, installation, different art. I'm an artist, so they were focusing on art and art making. And when the project was done, everything was picked up and it was returned to the dump. But I can tell you a good amount of it was kept because there was a lot of really amazing things done. So next slide. So this is the Baltimore Marathon, and I was looking out of my window one day, and you can go to the next slide. And on Utah Street, the marathon runs, and they have tables and tables of you know, cups and plastic bottles for Gatorade and water. Next slide, please. And it's being handed out, and it's a joyous occasion. It's a marathon. However, as you could see, next slide. Oops, are we missing some slides here? Could you go back a little bit? Go back. Go back. Ah. Okay, go forward. I did edit it down. Go again. So I started collecting the bottles, and because it seemed necessary. And then I was invited to direct the Lantern Parade at the Creative Alliance in 2011. Next slide. So I started an initiative where we cleaned up the park of all the plastic. People in the neighborhood and beyond started dropping their stuff off at the pool house. We took over the pool house. Next slide, please. And started making lanterns. So these were actually water bottles that were then in the pond, in the park during the parade. Next slide, please. And then I went into the high schools, and the students made hats and masks and lanterns to carry. And they were all with refuse, basically. And then next slide, please. And these are some of the lanterns that were made. You could see that's telephone paper on there. Next slide, please. So again, here you could see the bottles were transformed into lanterns. This is in Little Italy, and it's an installation entitled The Illuminated Fountain of Extinction. So it sort of played with this idea that Little Italy is, of course, one of the lowest areas in Baltimore. The water is rising there. So I had I created a performance that raised awareness in the neighborhood. And with that, did workshops also in this neighborhood. And actually, this was a project related to Light City. I don't know if any of you remember Light City in Baltimore. Next slide. These seesaws, basically, teetering, tottering on the brink, are filled with water, and it has a sound component of the recordings of the fish that we eat, collected by a scientist at St. Mary's College. So as you try to balance, you can hear the sound of the fish, next slide please, or the water as it kind of juggalugs through it. Again, making us aware of this sort of balance we have between us being full of water and then our relationship with plastic and with water. Next slide, please. And there generally were 16 feet, and this was a shorter one that was made for a room that was in a sort of water-filled environment. Next, please. This is short performance that I did, a street performance called the Garment Bag Hag. These are all dry cleaner bags. Next, please. And I basically walk around and have this garment made, and I have a plastic bag with a hanger, inviting people to use a garment bag instead of the single-use plastic. That's a real problem because it is not banned. It is not in the plastic bag banned in New York City, in Philly, all throughout. It's just not. The single-use dry cleaning bag, I don't know, they must have a good lobby, are not banned. So at the end of this project, next please. I also build these environments just with the plastic, and they're very beautiful because plastic is a miracle material made by human beings. It has a lot of good qualities, but basically the idea is that we transform our behaviors instead of being seduced by the material. Instead of, and these are rituals created, rituals that we do connected to domesticity, our daily life. These things, these sort of non-cleaning, clean things. This is called Dirty Clean Cleaners. And then I'm going to go to this project that I'm just beginning to work on now. This is a public project that was out in the Arlington Art Truck, which is a mobile art gallery with public art. And here I am asking people to consider what their clothes are made of, because as you know, most clothing now is not made from any natural materials and lasts in landfills for a very long time. So I have tags that I invited people to kind of look and see what they're wearing. Like, is it nylon? Is it wool? Is it linen? What are the soles of your shoes? And then ask them how long these things will last in the landfill. And if you go to the next slide, so here I would hand the form out and they could fill it out and we could see how many years it would last. So I am currently, this is a continuation of sort of domestic life, because one thing's for sure, we all wear clothing. Absolutely. We're born, we're wrapped in a swaddling little blanket, and then throughout our life, we probably spend more time wrapped in textiles of some sort. And then, of course, when we die, we're probably burnt in them, right? So it's a real issue, and I feel like we need to really consider what we're going to do with the textile waste that we are amassing, and also that's made of plastic, really. So it's a continuation of my exploration on plastic. So thank you, and thank you to the collective for inviting me for the panel, and thanks to everyone for being here. It's great.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. I always love hearing about your work, as you know, and it's exciting to share it with others as well. So now let's hear from Barbara Johnson, Community Advocacy Senior Manager with Blue Water Baltimore.
All right, great. Thank you so much. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, actually. For those who may not be familiar with Blue Water Baltimore, we formed in 2010. It was a collective of 5 different watershed organizations that came together as one, and really the idea was that everyone was working towards the same, had kind of the same message, the same mission. So it was easier to work under one umbrella, to cover more ground, and really to compete less for funding that was out there to get our projects established. Next slide, please. So this is just our mission statement. It's to restore the quality of Baltimore's rivers, streams, and harbor, and to foster a healthy environment, strong economy, and thriving communities. Next slide, please. I really love to show this graphic because it's just really covers a lot of our programming and what we do at Blue Water Baltimore. So we really like to come up with downstream solutions to a lot of pollution problems that start upstream and carry their way down into the bottom of our watershed. You'll see at the top under the pollution, those are our 4 main types of pollution that we deal with. So sewage, trash, stormwater runoff, and toxic pollutants. And then the bottom part of this graphic where you can see our solutions, it kind of goes across the range of programming we do. So we do tree plantings that can be massive amounts of trees in one area in a green space, or street trees. We do rain barrel workshops. We've done stream cleanups in the past and storm drain stenciling. We've helped people implement rain gardens and stormwater gardens. We have a native plant nursery, which is amazing. If you live in the area, I recommend going out there. Our staff is really, really knowledgeable. So you can plant native species in your home or businesses. We also have a water quality monitoring program. It's where I spent the last 8 years before I came to advocacy part of Blue Water. And we do monitoring in our streams and our harbor. And then we also do legislative work. So we work with a lot of different communities, helping with legislation, signing on, making public comments. So I definitely want to talk to York Road folk after this, or get connected with you. We just like to use our programming to get out into communities, and also the advocacy efforts. We'd like to hear from communities what are important to them, and to work with legislators on those issues. Next slide, please. This is just a map of our area. The one slide I showed that said the different organizations that had come together, one of those was the Baltimore Harbor Waterkeeper. So Blue Water Baltimore is a waterkeeper organization. We hold a license that this is our jurisdiction. We hold that license through the Waterkeeper Alliance, which is a global effort to fight for clean water. So you can see here, it's the Patapsco River watershed and the Back River watershed. And we work within the main streams of that area and down into the harbor, and where the non-tidal Patapsco, meaning that it has a tide, meets the Chesapeake Bay. Next slide, please. So I talked about the Baltimore Harbor Waterkeeper, and really that programming, what we do is we use science, policy, and law to protect and restore the local waterways. So the science being our water quality monitoring program. We also take groups of volunteers into the streams to look for pollution, different types. We do pollution investigations on our own. We have a pollution reporting hotline, which is required by the Waterkeeper Alliance, which is one of the things that we use a lot to work with the different communities. People report to us, and we can see what types of pollution different areas of the city and the county are dealing with. And again, we also deal with policy. So that can be on the legislative end. So we advocate for specific bills, work with legislators and different watershed groups. And we also advocate for stronger permits. Mostly we deal with water, but we are starting to deal with some air issues. So again, I really want to connect with the York Road folks. I'm very interested in your efforts there. And then we also use a law. So I call the Clean Water Act the Waterkeeper's Holy Grail. It is the only piece of legislation that we have in America that enables community members or citizens to sue for their right for clean water. And we also use the law for our enforcement work. So that's to hold polluters accountable, but also to make sure that government and municipalities are doing their jobs also. Next slide, please. So I mentioned our water quality monitoring program. You can see there, we have a website called the Baltimore Water Watch. You can also get to it if you Google How's the Water Hun. And what this has on it, it houses all the data that we've collected for over 10 years. And there's an interactive map on there where you can hover over all the different sites that we visit, and you can look at the different parameters that we sample for and when we were last there and what the results were. There's also a great page on this website that describes the different parameters that we monitor for and why we do. And it's in layman's term. You don't have to be a big scientist to understand it. But if you're a data nerd like me, it's a great place to refer to. You can look at the station that's closest to where you live, and you can also download this data if you want to use it for any kind of projects. Next slide, please. I just want to give a quick, a lot of my work is focused around stormwater. So I mentioned those 4 main pollutants that we deal with, and stormwater really is the vector for the other 3, which are sewage, trash, and toxic pollutants. I call stormwater the Autobahn for pollution for our waterways. And I like to show this map because it's an aerial view of Baltimore, and you can see barely the difference between the green and the gray. And the green is our tree canopy and our parks in Baltimore City. And then the gray is all impervious surface. So when I say that, I'm talking about surface where water cannot seep into, and the water just runs off into our local waterways. Next slide, please. A lot of people ask me when I talk about this stuff, why does stormwater runoff matter? It's just water. What's the big deal? Well, it is a big deal because when we talk about it, I like to talk about the quantity of it and the quality. So we know now with climate change, when we have these rain events, they may not happen more frequently. They do some years, but when they are happening, they have a bigger, they're at a bigger volume. So it's causing different things in the streams, like erosion. It can change the channel of the stream, whatnot. And then the quality of all the pollutants that it's bringing in with us. Next slide, please. This is, I call our golden ticket. It's one of the best infographics we've ever had made at Blue Water Baltimore. And this is just of our pipe system, what is underneath our feet. We love to talk about how it works, teach people what the 3 different pipes are and how they interact with each other, and what its effects on water quality. Next slide, please. And we love to teach people about the different types of pollutants that are affecting our waterways. So teaching people what they are, how to identify them. And then next slide, please. And where to report them, which is a big thing in the city and the county. So you can report to the city and the county, the state, and even the federal level, and then also to Blue Water Baltimore. Next slide, please. And then what you can do. It can be something as small as picking up after your pet, not putting grease down your sink, or limiting your water use during a rainstorm, and getting involved with legislation, using native plants in your businesses and homes, and then volunteering with Blue Water Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Such inspiring work and so many tangible things, actions that we can take, and ways to get involved. Thank you so much. Now let's hear from Hugh Pocock. Hugh's an artist educator, a founding coordinator of the minor in sustainability and social practice, and the major in ecosystems, sustainability, and justice at MICA. Hugh, thank you.
Great. Hey, I'm unmuted. Thanks, Atlantika Collective. This is great. So nice to be part of such a cool group here. Thanks everyone for coming and being here on Tuesday night. Yeah, I'm an artist and an educator. My own work comes out of, well, parts of it come out of this belief that I have that humans should no longer control the planet, and that we need to share it with other creatures and plants and everything else, ending human hegemony. Next slide. I've thought about that animals need to learn how to make fire, and I've thought about how to teach them to make fire, share that skill with them, even the playing field. Next slide. There's a project that I'm making or hope to make called No Man's Land, which is a park that's only for plants and animals, and people cannot go inside, and the animals can come and go freely. Okay, next slide. Along with this is this sort of crazy future that we have. I'm an educator, and I at art school at MICA, and teaching young people and learning about climate change. I teach a class called Climate Change and Sustainability. And this thing, you know, that right now, students that are in college will be 45 in 2050. And the current projections for those are really, and these are the conservative projections, are really dire. So there's really we're in a, you know, there isn't a lot of space inside of art and design schools to really discuss this. And kids are coming in, some are coming in just sort of like, I don't want to deal. Some are like, I kind of want to deal. And then there are some students who are like, I really want to deal with this. Next slide, please. Over the past 5 years, we've developed a new major at MICA called Ecosystem Sustainability and Justice, which is a place, next slide, for students that are interested in art and design, but also these other things, which are these sort of ping pong ball themes that go around in young people's minds, and how do you learn the skills of being a creative person but addressing these. And there's a new different form of art and design education, the traditional 18th and 19th century practices that we have is extracting a lot of materials out of the earth, recombining them into sort of visual media. And that's sort of, a lot of that's great, but then it's also part of the problem that we have. So how do artists and designers really engage with having a sustainable practice, but also be part of building, going towards a more sustainable future? Next slide, please. So one of the other things about this program is that it's super interdisciplinary, because every other program, all the disciplines in the world are being really driven now by both climate change and social justice issues. It's really one of the main drivers. The Anthropocene is driving the environment. We're changing our planet, but also the response to this is sort of changing all these different fields. So students can come into this and work in any manner that they like, but learning the skills of how to transfer that to be focused on social justice, environmental justice, and working with other people. Next slide, please. Well, I'll just keep talking about that, but I don't have quite a slide for it. One of the other skills of the major is how do students work with people outside the studio? It's sort of going past a studio practice and into a more what we call engaged practice, where students will be working with organizations in Baltimore, social groups in Baltimore, communities in Baltimore, and learning how to do that in an ethical way. Not something that is called really extractive community practice, where artists go into a community, learn about it, and then return to the kind of more privileged environment to then show their work. But how do we do that so that actually participating and actually learning with members and experts in our community? So that's my time. We can play this video. Students like to be part of this wonderful city.
Where do you want to live?
All right. Thank you.
One more time for the.
Oh, you can follow ESJ on Instagram. You can scan that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. And just great to hear about all the trajectories coming out of that. As you know, most of the members of Atlantika have a connection to MICA. And so, seeing the richness of this program and actually meeting with your students when we came there was really amazing. So now we have time for a Q&A, and we'd encourage folks who are attending to put your questions in the chat. And I think Katie also is able to turn on mics and allow people to speak. I'm just going to jump us off with one question, actually, for the activists fighting the human crematorium. Can you talk a little bit about how you rally support in your community? I mean, it's such an important issue, and how do you activate people? I mean, I think part of this panel is trying to combine the power of creativity and art with these environmental justice issues. And so on some level, art can be used as a tool in that way. I'm kind of curious, are there creative ways you've gotten people to get engaged with your cause? And then also, how do you work together as like three different people with very different specialties? And because we're also an artist collective with a lot of different kind of specialties. So if you all could maybe address that.
All great questions. I think, we have used, first of all, there's the three of us are very different. So Lisa is, I don't know, Lisa, do you want to just say who you are and what you do? Because Lisa's been our science advisor, and we found her through a neighbor of mine.
Right. I mean, and Karen just answered your question, which is it's all word of mouth and neighbors and friends who care. about the neighborhood that they're living in. And so
Yeah.
my day job is I work for the Defense Health Agency, and I lead a team that runs environmental population health tracking metrics. And so I do that for military bases worldwide. And so I'm using my day job skills to hopefully be a little bit useful to informing like what the regulatory, what the legal landscape is for managing air quality, especially in an urban environment. I'll just say one quick word about air pollution in urban areas. The biggest source that we're concerned about comes from mobile sources, from cars, from trucks, from idling vehicles in drive-through lines. And it's a source of air pollution that is largely unregulated, both at the state and federal level, but it encroaches on people's health, especially in an urban environment. So every little additional exposure that you create in those environments is already on top of the burden that exists because of vehicular traffic. And I'll stop right there. Thanks for having us.
No, thank you, Lisa. And I will say, like, so we have worked really hard to find people who have skills that we need to engage in this campaign. Cindy has a lot of training and is involved with Moms Demand Action. And so she's a pretty seasoned activist in that way. I have a lot of community organizing, teaching, and some environmental background, as well as my day job is with a community development corporation. And, I will say we've made signs, we've got t-shirts, we have done everything we can to kind of make this as graphic as possible. We could do better. But I will say a lot of this has come down to the relationships that we've built over time, and then our willingness in COVID and, now that we're sort of post-COVID, to go out and knock on doors and find people and let them know. So we found people, we relied on the people already in our networks, but we use good old-fashioned community organizing to find other people. So we found, so we have a group now of a core group of people who are friends, who are comrades together in this. And, we were able to turn out, 170 people to a meeting with the Maryland Department of the Environment about the crematorium in December, and get 3 TV cameras and print media there as well. So, we're working it in those after our jobs are over, hours.
Of course. Well, that's amazing. Thank you. So if there are any questions from the audience, we'd love to hear from you. So please feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand if you're able to. We also have some prepared questions if no one's ready to answer a question at this moment.
I can ask a quick question while people are thinking. And everyone should have the ability to turn on their mics and their cameras now. So please feel welcome to do that. Laura, I've got a question for you. I'm curious, how do your students respond? Because I know a lot of what you teach involves teaching the students how to work with material that is salvaged and waste materials. How do they respond to this prompt?
Better and better as we move through time. I think that I initially come through it with this idea of just curiosity, deconstruction, and reconstruction. So I invite them to bring an object that they have, that they would like to explore, and then they use all manner of tools to take it apart, and then they readapt it. That's the idea, to have it sort of be deconstructed and reconstructed, and that is a way of making things. So, and right now I'm teaching a assemblage class, and it's, people are just going and doing some dumpster diving and, bringing in things that they source. I think that more and more, students are living this reality, and they're aware of it, and I think they have a little bit of anxiety about it. So the idea is to give them a strategy so that they can invent and experiment and explore how things are made so they can remake them, you know, in a way that could be sustainable, you know. And I think it really requires understanding your own, and not only yours, but our species' habits, you know, what we do in our day-to-day life and how that affects sort of the environment that we're living in. It's those small details. So I just start with the deconstruction.
Thank you.
Well, since we don't have any questions yet from the audience, we'll just keep going. Oh, we've got one. Great. Chris, are you able to turn your mic on?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I guess this is for everyone on the panel, whoever feels like jumping in, I suppose. I'm curious to know what you do to bring hope to your work or to the future. I mean, we're in such a time of crisis in terms of the environment, and we have to have hope to move forward. And I love what all of you are doing, and I'm just curious to hear how you bring that forward in terms of perhaps inspiring others. Whoever wants to answer, it's kind of open.
I could talk about it a little, but if anyone else on the panel wants to go for it. I work with, 19, 20, 21-year-olds who are coming in, and these issues can be just absolutely devastating, especially once you look at them really closely and really involve yourself. I think part of people's apprehension about really being involved in some of these issues is because of how hard it is to cope with it now. But what have found is that by being together, it really makes all the difference. Because then there's a lot of, if there's community of people that are talking about these and what we can do. And that makes a whole lot. And then we do now really look at the kind of the emotional impact of what actually embracing all this information is like, and how to look after yourself. How do you look after yourself while coping with really looking at the eyes of the coyote of climate change, or really looking deeply into the history of white supremacy in this country. What you do. And so it's about a lot of self-care as well. And there's also like really kind of cool stuff going on. There's a lot of great people working on this. There's lots of really interesting people, really doing really great work.
I think I would just add too that there's, I think the bringing people together to work together on a righteous cause is incredibly gratifying. When you can do that, I think it's incredible. And I also feel like, when you have a group of people and you're organizing around something that's really important, I think helping people feel a sense of their own power, right? Even in small ways is important, I think this is hard stuff, but I think it's possible to be happy warriors in a way, right? Realistic and happy. And there is something to be said for working together as a group. That's very soul feeding.
I love that idea, Karen, of a happy warrior. And Joe, I see you had your hand up earlier, so let's get the question from Joe, and then we'll hear from Laura, and then we've got a question in the chat.
Okay, thank you. This has been a wonderful experience. And this is more of a comment than a question, and that is the plastics industry is driven by oil and gas. It's driven by all the lobbyists and this huge energy structure, and I feel that's very hard to go against, but it's possible, I think, to work from the top down, as you all are starting to do, working through legislature and the government, and it's a multifaceted problem. It's not just plastics around in the environment; it's the whole supply chain of where they come from.
I agree with that. I also think that plastics are sort of incredible. It's an incredible material, and it's been horrendously misused, and it has allowed for, I mean, a democratization of our life. Everyone is sitting on a plastic toilet seat, no doubt. And what would that mean if they were all another material? And that's cool, because if we challenge people to work and push through what plastics are, lightweight, there are countries that have absolutely no water, that are carrying, clay and steel. Well, now they have these lightweight containers. So it's not the material, and the material needs to be integrated into sort of the culture, and maybe another material made out of a product that is not petroleum based, would be optimum. But to just sort of look at the plastic, and I'm really I'm into material studies. Like, I think that's so important. Really look at the material, see what it's doing, see what it's not doing, see what's toxic about it, see how it is a helpful thing. I mean, can you imagine a hospital without plastics now? I mean, we have plastic knees and we have plastic elbows, and the whole thing, artificial hearts. And I'm not saying it's just not the material. It's like we have to really study the material and see what we want from that material and jettison what we don't. And yeah, the economy, it's such a weird alchemy, but I agree with you. It was economics that sort of ushered in, and not a positive form of economics, that ushered in this use of plastics. So I think that's a challenge that someone with humor and play and collective energy can work to tinker, and to tinker in a big way to create materials that could push us forward. And so I am hopeful, even though, and I'm hopeful, I'm hoping and I'm hopeful that we can do something before we reach a brink, a very bad brink,
I would just like to say one last thing, and that is Prince George's County has banned plastic single-use bags. So that's a very hopeful sign. And so now you see people with paper bags, you see people going into grocery stores with reusable bags, just because they can't get them anymore. And it's wonderful.
Yeah, less stuff, less weird fruits in the trees blowing around.
Yeah, Baltimore City banned them. You can tell they're not up there in the trees now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to add too that there's actually, I think it's the 4th year it's been introduced this year in the Maryland legislation as the single-use beverage bottle refund tax. So I grew up around New York and New Jersey, and we could take our bottles and get money for them. And, you know, hopefully it'll pass this year, but, and I don't want to take any of materials away from Laura, but maybe you can get money for the ones you don't use. But, you know, if anyone's interested, there is, you know, you can sign up on the Maryland legislative website and you can submit your own testimony, about these bills. You can look up the bill number. You have to submit your testimony 24 hours prior for the Senate and 48 hours for the House. But the hearings are, I think I can find the dates if anyone's interested and get them for you. They're coming up in the next 2 weeks. But if it's something that you're interested in, you absolutely have a voice and can be heard. So to also speak about the idea of hope, it's very easy to become a nihilist when you work in the environmental field. But I have to say, I want to echo what Hugh was saying and everyone else, that, you know, there's hope in community. And one thing that, at least I feel like in America, we've lost a lot of community. There's no humanity in community and no community in humanity. And my hope that I hold on to is bringing that back by working with communities that have specific needs, especially when it comes to environmental justice and in the Baltimore area. So for water and air pollution.
That's great. And I think just echoing that, community is such a huge part of what we're trying to do as this collective. We've now shared it, you know, a few different schools, and we're always trying to bring together different disciplines. So I love this, like the community of kind of cross-talking from art to advocacy. There is that question in the chat that I want to make sure we get to for Barbara, which is, do you have an opinion on the likely success of outsourcing control of the Black River wastewater treatment plant?
Ooh, that's a loaded question.
Okay, that might be longer than
no, I think if I can answer it shortly, I mean, you know, we were involved in a lawsuit with Baltimore City, and there was a point where MES, the Maryland Environmental Services, took over the Back River wastewater treatment plant. They have been brought into compliance. So I think that my opinion would be, I'd like to give them the chance to stay within compliance. I think that the time that takeover was necessary because things were in in bad shape. And so I don't know how popular that opinion was. I think the communities were very split on it. Some people wanted that takeover, some people didn't. But hopefully with a new consent decree, that those wastewater treatment plants will stay in compliance. I hope that answers the question, but I have very loaded opinions for my own self. So that's probably for another time.
Thank you. Are there any other questions out there?
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, but in Prince George's County, and I think, as we've just heard, there's so much policy that needs doing, and the role of art and artists to inspire and inform and mobilize for those policies is really critically important. And I also, for some time, I've been wondering about, in our landscape and native plant world and invasive plant, that we need a new visual ethic for our yards, our communities, that we've been built around, you know, the lawn and manicured lawn and the use of pesticides and all that, the energy for that. And I'm seeing, you know, some great new landscape designs. And I think that art and artists and designers really have a lot to do to help us come up with a new visual vocabulary and beauty. So I think sometimes that beauty doesn't come from within, it comes from structures from without. So that's one area that I think is really would be great for artists, art community, and designers, for bringing some of these new ethics. And I think that also goes for design of like clothing. And we've talked about the clothing. And if we had a new beauty and feeling about keeping our clothes as long as we can keep them and not have new ones every season, you know, how can the artists and designers help move us, you know, move the needle in those worlds?
I mean, I think there's been a lot done, but nowhere near enough done, really. The Industrial Revolution was a textile revolution, and it's been progressing in a way that has been, you know, using and abusing waterways and I mean, in terms of social justice, really questionable. I mean, it was just, you know, capitalism, really, the beginning. And so we're still dealing with that. And also now we're in a global situation. We make very little of our garments in this country because of the economic system. So that's very complex, but there's been a lot of designers who have been working in sustainable textiles and have been on it. There's also incredible space age textiles. You know, I mean, what about the stuff that people wear in space? Were it not for what we wear, we would not have migrated out of Mesopotamia. You know, it's very interesting how textile, and I like to call it the pliable plane, has really informed our culture. But I 100% agree with you about that. And I think that there needs to be innovation. And I am a great believer in the spectacle. And I'm thinking about the crematorium, and I'm thinking, you need a parade of zombies over there to really everybody look out and go, oh my God, you know, it's like, because it would sort of address the issue in terms of life and death in a way that might be simple, but it would raise awareness. Sometimes you do need to use, I want to say, the tactics of the Dadaists and the punk scene. You have to raise interest, and you can do it with humor, and you know, there's other strategies that can be used, and it's an ancient strategy. You know, all cultures use spectacle in that way in their culture. And so that's one way.
We might have to use that.
Yes, yes. I have a question for Barbara.
Okay, go
Barbara,
ahead.
can I ask Barbara a question about the a lot of states, and I know when I was in Maine, I just put my bottles and my cans in machines, and you know, you get your change. So why is that not here? Is that not viable anymore?
So that is part of the bill that is up. It's, if this bill passes, it wouldn't even come into fruition for 3 years, because that part of the program, how the bottles are returned and how people get the money back, would have to be approved. That part of the plan would have to be approved by MDE. And it's also, this bill has no fiscal note, so which is great, makes it easier to pass a bill when it has no fiscal note. But it also takes more planning to have for the actions to be able to be followed through. So that is part of the plan. From what the Sierra Club is leading this charge. So I've just been in a supporting role with that and learning all this. I've been learning all kinds of new things about how a bottle return happens, but that is part of it. There would be, they look like vending machines almost, or like how you would get a movie out of a machine out of the Safeway or something, where you can return the bottles and glass and get the money back or get a receipt. And then also there'll be stations, which is what I remember as a kid. It almost looked like a small trailer where you would go up and bring your bags of recycled, and then you get a receipt or get the money back there if there was actually a person there.
In Maine, you just go in and put your bottles in and you get the money out. Of course, they don't have a high density population. Like, I can't see that really happening here in New Jersey or New York, but I don't know why not. I mean, there's other, there's plenty of vending machines.
I think the part of it is the lobby. So the beverage lobby, like, as you know, plastic is the cheapest thing to put sodas in, or whatever you want to use, water. And so it's unfortunate that there can't be a public health angle on this. I'm trying to find someone from School of Public Health to testify because of microplastics.
Yeah, and the nanoplastics in the bottom.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate that that lobby is so big and strong that this bill has been up numerous years and still hasn't passed. I hope this is the year. Sometimes people think, the people that I've been kind of learning advocacy steps from say, sometimes you have to be in it for the long haul, and it may not happen this year, but it just seems like such a no-brainer. The data from the trash wheels alone. One thing that we teach about in Blue Water is how every street level storm drain you see empties into a waterway. So all of those bottles, everything that people are throwing into the ground, or it gets blown around recycling, that ends up in the waterways. And, I really think a bottle return would help curb that. Not only people, I'd separate my recycling for someone, knowing that probably someone would come along the alley. I live in an alley street in Baltimore City. Someone would probably come along and collect it all and get the money, and I'm fine with that. But it's unfortunate that the lobby is so strong. I think the Restaurant Association is actually testifying against it. So I think it's seen as an inconvenience as well from, if a bar or restaurant doesn't recycle, then they're going to be made to recycle. So they see it as an inconvenience.
But if there was a machine, then they maybe wouldn't have to. Somebody else would do it for them. But that's really dicey too, because I used to always have the can man come around and collect aluminum cans. And then I went to a material reclamation center, which are just astounding garbage places, which are all privatized, which is sort of sad. I wish it might have some sort of state or federal issue funding, especially for the workers. But it just became untenable because eventually the aluminum became like 0.05 a can. And then all of a sudden it would be a little bit more. So when is it worth it and that's probably why they're battling it. When is it worth it for the can man in my neighborhood to collect the bottles and bring it over to the, to the metal place, which isn't that far. And, with his cart, and he comes when aluminum's up, which for him is a few cents. So if they're collecting things, then there's no way, unless they can say, oh, okay, aluminum's this much today, you'll get this much cents, or
Well, it is the unfortunate economics of recycling. I mean, glass isn't worth anything, and no one else wants our recycling because we use the cheapest products. So it's unfortunate that plays a role. I mean, Baltimore City there are times that if you put glass into your recycling, it can ruin a batch because it's not worth anything at that time. So, but then to do a whole campaign of telling people, oh, don't put glass in right now, and then it could change within a month, and then to say, oh, actually now you can put glass in your recycling. There's just so many layered steps to it. And I'm hoping if this bill passes, it cuts out, kind of weighs out that evens out that scale, then everything's just worth money. And someone's going to want that money. And just to speak to Laura, what you said, there is, in part of that plan for MDE, they would have to find a company that would be responsible to come collect from restaurants and other places, bars. And it's sad that is just being looked over by the Restaurant Association, because it's not the people that it's going to cost money to are the people that are producers. That's who has to pay up front. Everyone else is really can only benefit from this. So it's really sad. I mean, I can't really.
so complicated, and
Mhm.
the technology is so shoddy. I don't know. I was around at some with Cynthia Connolly, who's an artist in DC, who's really interested in the environment. And I mean, when I go online and I look at some of the recycling places, I had a student at MICA, I teach at MICA, and you know, I was very interested in the recycling over there because they stopped getting the single use plastic, the plastic film, right? And it caused trouble for us because though that is the most recyclable plastic there is, we had always sort of we had outsourced it because, you know, we were focusing on hard plastics and all that. But she took me onto the web in Asia, and they have like all these machine arms that do all the picking. It's all animated, you know, and when you come here and see, you know, the companies, I don't know what the requirements are. To me, it looks like they go pick up people at casa and they're just wearing their coats and kerchiefs. And I'm like, wow, you know, it just doesn't seem proper. I would really, I kind of wonder why the EPA is not involved in recycling or in the afterlife of products. You know, they're interested in the data and the amount that gets moved around, but they don't do it. It says it right on their website. It's never been done. And if you were to lobby that, it would probably mean our taxes would go up. So, you know, it's really, we're not really investing in the reality of being living, breathing humans that shed stuff, clothing and skin and bodies and
All right.
metal.
I'm
Yeah,
beginning
so
to
I don't
also.
mean to, oh, go ahead, Hugh. I think Cindy has had her mic unmiked for a while too, and maybe waiting to say something. So Hugh and then Cindy, and we will be wrapping up soon because I want to be respectful.
Oh, actually.
Okay.
Cindy, go ahead.
Well, you know, when we go back to hope, you know, when I listen to everyone, that gives me the hope as being a, you know, a resident of a community where they're about to put a crematorium. You can kind of lose hope in that area because I really can't afford to move out of the neighborhood. And so my privilege, and I don't mean as far as race or anything, but privilege as for people who can move out financially, you know, where they can, you know, my family, we can't move. So this does give me hope because at some point you lose hope thinking, am I just stuck with this? You know, we can't go anywhere. And then we have to wait maybe 5-10 years down the line to see what the health effects will be. But just being on this panel and listening to everyone, it does give me hope. And it gives me hope for my community that we have a group of people who will stand up and continue to fight for our environment. So I'd just like to say thank you to the whole panel. Thank you.
Thank you too. And
That's
Hugh?
probably a good place to stop. I'm not gonna say anything after that.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, to the panelists and Billy, and for those of you that came and attended. As with Atlantika, we will make this available on the website. We've recorded the presentations, and we will have a copy of the presentation as well that we can share along with the recording. Billy, did you want to add anything?
No, I love that last message, Cindy. That's really, you know, we wanted to get like-minded people together from different areas, and I think, you know, we all tend to be isolated at times in our own little disciplines and our own little concerns, and so I hope this is just the beginning, you know, and that we can continue to reach out to one another and support each other. So
Thanks,
thank you all.
everybody.
Thank you all for coming, and have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.